Listen up class, today you are going to learn the truth about fluoride. Get out your pencils and start taking notes. This is important stuff.
What do you mean the truth about fluoride? I thought it was good for you and helps you prevent cavities.
No, everything you have been told about fluoride is a lie. Today you're going to get schooled, and I'm going to give you the facts.
Okay, I'm ready. Please tell me the facts about fluoride.
Did you know if you swallow a pea-sized amount of fluoride, you are supposed to call the Poison Control Center? This is the same amount that's present in an 8-ounce glass of water. The CDC has studies showing fluoride poisoning in 41% of children. The ADA and CDC have also warned against giving fluoridated water to children.
This is scary stuff, so you're telling me fluoride is a drug?
Absolutely. The government defines fluoride as a potent neurotoxin. It's nothing but mass medication without consent and without a doctor monitoring your dose.
Oh my, does all water have fluoridation?
No, in fact over 97% of Western Europe have chosen not to add fluoride to their water supply. There are some water supplies in the United States which have also removed it. 13 Nobel Peace Prize winners have opposed it. 300 EPA scientists have spoken out against it and called it criminal, and 3,800 doctors, dentists and nurses want it banned.
How dangerous is it? What can it do to you?
I'm glad you asked that question. Fluoride can cause the following complications in your body from ingestion: tooth staining, brittle teeth and bones, thyroid malfunctions, neurological disorders, arthritis, bone cancer, migraine headaches, infertility and lower IQ.
Wow, that's really scary.
Yes it is, but I'm not done yet. Did you know that fluoride chemicals which are added to the water are chemical byproducts of the fertilizer industry? They are toxic acid wastes.
Oh my.
There has been no difference either in areas that fluoridate water when compared to areas that do not in tooth decay.
What can I do with my water if fluoridated, and how do I avoid it?
Very easily. You can buy a premium water filter that removes fluoride and other toxins. Also only buy natural oral care products which don't contain fluoride. Class dismissed.
Now, Dr. Burke, your research shows that if all of the United States had been fluoridated, that would mean about 70,000 extra deaths because of cancer per annum. Those are remarkable, impressive, and in fact rather disquieting figures. Could you shortly describe your research in this field and what results did you get from it?
Yes. The 70,000, of course, would represent 1/5 of all the cancer deaths in the United States, twice as many from breast cancer in women, and twice as many as from lung cancer in man. Our studies involve comparing the deaths of all persons in the 10 largest fluoridated cities of the United States with the 10 largest non-fluoridated cities in the United States year by year. And we obtained a very remarkable curve, which you can see here perhaps. Here is the fluoridated, and here is the non-fluoridated set of 10 cities each. Here's where the fluoridation started, and before this time, both sets of cities were identical. But no sooner had fluoridation started than this curve began to go up, the deaths began to increase, so that this effect occurs very promptly within 1, 2, or 5 years.
Now this, sir, is conclusive evidence that fluor kills because of cancer.
It is one of the most conclusive bits of scientific and biological evidence that I have come across in my 50 years in the field of cancer research.
Would this then, in your opinion, be the end of fluor in water, in drinking water?
It should be the end, and in the United States, it should so be the end by federal law known as the Delaney Amendment, which says that anything found to induce cancer in man or animals cannot be legally put into the food or drink of man or animals. And so, and this is all less than 1 year old, so that it entirely changes any previous ideas of fluoridation that anyone may have had, because this is the first real indication of an important effect.
Now, in this country, of course, the state of the dental state of the Union, the way people's teeth look, is incredible indeed. Would you say that stopping fluor had other effects than increasing the dental problems in this country?
Well, I would rather look at it that it would certainly help the cancer death situation in this country, which I'm sure most people would agree is far more important than a temporary benefit to teeth in adolescent children. This, you see, amounts to public murder on a grand scale. It is a public crime, it would be, to put fluoride in the drinking water of people.
Now, the children of this cameraman and mine, sir, take fluor. Should we stop this immediately?
Well, in my opinion, if they were my children, they would not take it anymore. I can only recommend for myself, but I would suggest to you that they stop it.
Is there a difference in having fluor in drinking water or administering little fluor pills to children?
Well, of course, the little fluor pills are a much smaller proposition than drinking gallons of water per day or per week, as well as taking a bath in it and washing your automobile in it and watering your lawns. That's a very massive thing compared to brushing teeth with fluoridated toothpaste. But our work is immediately concerned with drinking water. What happens to toothpaste, I'm quite willing to let the future studies go into that in more detail.
Catching up with text tonight. Thanks, Jane and John. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the program. Later, we reveal Adelaide's rate-busting mortgage beating the banks by a whole 1%, and TV's MasterChef and its effect on the economy. But first, we consume it every day with the reassurance from our health authorities that it is doing us good. The truth is, fluoride is a poison, and adding it to our drinking water is an evolving social experiment started 40 years ago. Now one of the world's top fluoride experts has issued a grim warning about what it could be doing to our health, and that of unborn children. Yet as Frank Pengello reports, you'll get a different spin from dentists and health bureaucrats.
We consider that as a poison. Why should a poison be in drinking water?
The poison is fluoride. It's there because government health bureaucrats and dentists tell us it's for our common good, for reducing tooth decay, and at levels which won't harm you. That doesn't wash with Professor A.K. Shashila.
They should realize it's a poisonous substance. It doesn't promote health. It is a disease-causing agent, and fluoridation should be stopped as early as possible.
Professor Shashila is one of the world's leading experts on fluoride. Her own extensive research, along with 70 years of data in India, backs up what she's saying, and it's most disturbing.
I would consider a pregnant mother taking fluoride-contaminated products. I'm using the word products, which includes water, toothpaste, black tea, processed food products which has fluoride.
Any liquid?
Anything. Where her urinary fluoride is high, she is going to cause a lot of damage to the fetus, the growing embryo, the infant which is going to be born.
The American Dental Association warns against using fluoridated water to mix baby formula. Not so here.
They don't read, They are not aware, they don't update themselves, they don't do any research. So we are in a serious problem.
Professor Shashila says exposure to fluoride could also be the cause of many ills like neck, shoulder and joint pains, which may be misdiagnosed by doctors. She routinely does urine tests to check fluoride levels in her patients.
Remove the fluoride ingestion starting from toothpaste, black tea, fluoridated water, whatever, and you bring down the urinary fluoride to normal limits, the patient recovers.
Fluoride is also used as a preservative and also lurks in many products we consume. But apart from toothpaste, it's not listed on labels.
So it is coming into one's body through many sources, and you are not aware of it.
The fluoride that goes into our drinking water is toxic waste from the production of fertiliser.
For maybe 100 years, the phosphate fertilizer industry put out two very, very poisonous gases into the environment, hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride. Eventually, they were required to capture those, and they did it with a wet spray, water, and that water converts these two very toxic gases into hexafluorosilicic acid. And it's this scrubbing liquor, which is about 25% strong, is put into tanker trucks, driven around the country, and added to our drinking water.
Here's what's in the mix made in Australia, a sickening cocktail of heavy metals like arsenic, barium, beryllium, cadmium, lead, mercury, and on it goes, and in much higher concentrations than is allowed for lead and arsenic.
Why should you make people drink a poisoned water?
Well, it's forced medication for the masses, and there are more than 1,000 doctors and scientists around the world who, like Professor Shashila, condemn what's going on.
The problem with adding medicine to water is an obvious one of consent, that people can't give their informed consent, which is a basic of medical ethics.
Fluoride is about to be added to Mount Gambier's water from the Blue Lake. Alex Young is livid. He's collected a petition of more than 6,000 signatures against the move, or a quarter of the town, which has been ignored by the state government.
The issue of fluoridation has largely been ignored by the government, in not terms they want to push it, but in terms of allowing the community to have a say in the matter. They simply just ignore us. And I am, and the rest of the group here, are just amazed at the level of ignorance shown on this matter.
We wanted to talk to someone in SA Health about the issue. Instead, we got a written statement which didn't address our questions directly. It claims Mount Gambier children have 78% more tooth decay than those in Adelaide who drink fluoridated water, and that it's considered safe and used in other developed countries like the USA, UK and Canada. Well, there aren't many more on that list, as anti-fluoride campaigner Professor Paul Connett points out.
Most European countries do not fluoridate. Austria, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Italy, Greece, Portugal. The overwhelming number of countries in the world do not fluoridate, and guess what? Their teeth are just as good, if not better, than ours.
It aggravates dental decay. The tooth gets pitted, perforated, it gets chipped off, it breaks, and also at a much younger age, the people will become edentulous, means they will lose their teeth.
The anti-fluoride movement says while there's ample evidence to support what they're saying, governments still refuse to listen or fund research to study the impact it has on health.
The real culprit here is these bureaucrats who are spinning the information before it gets to the decision makers. And that's what's outrageous. We expect, I think, politicians to spin, but we shouldn't expect civil servants to spin.
A mistake?
Yes, of course.
Are you aware that fluoride is in our public drinking water?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. No, I wasn't.
No?
Yes.
Yes?
I'm aware of this.
Yes, I've heard that before, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Are you aware that fluoride is in our public drinking water?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, it's not a good thing though? No.
I'm aware of it, yeah.
Yeah. Now we are, yes.
Why do you think they put fluoride in the water?
Well, perhaps they want to keep the water clear or something. I have no idea.
My teeth, the enamel on my teeth, yes. Perhaps prevent decay, yeah?
So I think they put it in the drinking water like back in the day around the time that penicillin came out as like an oral sort of preventative sort of thing. Same reason that it's in toothpaste and the stuff that you get your teeth clean and all that other stuff.
I don't know, to give it a better taste, to clean it. I don't know.
Does it kill bacteria at all?
Clean it out, I guess.
Is it good for your teeth? Some part of your teeth, I heard?
To my understanding is to actually, I don't know, sort of clean it, but I think it's all about population control, right?
They tell you it's because it helps, I think, strengthen your teeth enamel, but I have no idea why they really put it in there. I'm not sure.
So, do you feel it's good and safe for us?
Well, I know that we have some of the safest drinking water in the world.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't like chemicals being added to things that like don't need to be there. If we already have fluoride in toothpaste, then I don't see why we have to actually be ingesting it. Because you're not actually supposed to ingest it. That's why you spit the toothpaste out, right? So.
No.
Why do you feel that way?
Well, everything that's extra in the water, I don't think that's a good idea.
I would guess if it's in the water, it's because they did some studies and they think it's safe enough.
I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, on the flip side, when I go to the dentist, I just don't get my teeth cleaned with fluoride anymore because it causes rot and all that other good stuff.
No, probably not.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, well, we live in a first world country, so I doubt it would be a bad thing. I doubt they would want to poison citizens of Canada and Toronto especially.
Well, I know in like dental stuff we're supposed to spit it out. Is it bad? Like I'm assuming it's bad for us that we're ingesting it.
For us?
I don't think it's safe at all. It's a poison.
Sodium fluoride, which is what they use, it's a poisonous chemical. It's been scientifically proven to do more harm than good. How does that make you feel about it being in our water?
Well, I would prefer to drink bottled water.
Yeah?
I don't want to drink tap water.
That's kind of creepy, actually, knowing that now.
It's a little alarming.
Not good.
Yeah?
Well, it's really hard to escape because I don't know if you know, it's also in almost all bottled water. So you have to make sure you look on the front tags of your bottles for 0.0 ppm.
Shit. Yeah, pretty much. I don't know. I'm blown away. I can't argue that. That's messed up then.
Well, worried about, like, nobody knows about it and it's in there.
That's kind of concerning.
I feel terrible about it, but what can you do?
It's unacceptable.
There's not really anything we can do about it.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking that actually.
Yeah. How does that make you feel about knowing that it's in the water?
Iffy. I don't know.
It seems the general public does not know a whole lot about fluoride, and many are questioning its overall safety. Sodium fluoride, sodium silicate fluoride, and fluorosilicic acid, all used in dental offices, toothpaste, and water fluoridation, are toxic waste substances created from the creation processes in the fertilizer, steel, nuclear, and aluminum industries. These artificial substances should not be confused with the natural occurring fluoride element. Contrary to popular belief, fluoride used in fluoridation practices is not a pharmaceutical-grade substance, but instead industrial toxic waste. When these industries were faced with the problem of how to legally dispose of the excessive amount of toxic waste they were producing, Alcoa, the Aluminum Company of America, the largest producer of fluoride at the time, hired the services of scientist Gerald J. Cox to discover whether fluoride could be beneficial for preventing tooth decay. Gerald Cox, with vested interest, concluded that since the natural fluoride element can help in preventing tooth decay, these poisonous chemicals can also. After the release of Cox's claims, The fluoride waste these industries produced began being trapped in the smokestacks of the factories, collected, put into barrels, and sold to municipalities to add to their drinking water. Before these industries were trapping fluoride emissions, the fluoride pollution was scorching vegetation, killing crops, and crippling livestock. Today, this very same toxic chemical is ingested by millions each day through public water supplies. While these industries solved their waste problems and began profiting, communities are now ingesting an extremely toxic chemical. You most commonly hear of fluoride being used in the dental office or in fluoridated toothpaste, as it is believed to help prevent tooth decay. The unproven theory behind the use of fluoride on teeth is that it combines with tooth enamel to make the teeth harder and more resistant to acid attacks. Hydroxyapatite, a form of calcium on the teeth, is susceptible to too much acid and will break down, leaving teeth exposed to decay. It's assumed that fluoride creates a shield for the hydroxyapatite, and with fluoride being more resistant to acid, it helps protect the teeth. All of these methods apply to fluoride being used topically. We also find the systemic use of fluoride through adding it to public drinking water. In theory, putting fluoride in the water will allow the fluoride to be ingested, pass through the body, and find its way to the teeth so the tooth enamel can be hardened. It is believed that since the use of fluoride, dental and oral health has increased greatly, and it should all be credited to the use of fluoride. Further, although fluoride is recognized as a highly toxic poison by regulation boards, it is still approved and nominated as one of the top 10 great medical innovations of our time by the Center for Disease Control. According to Christopher Bryson, author of the book The Fluoride Deception, fluoride science is corporate science, fluoride science is DDT science, it's asbestos science, it's tobacco science. Simply put, fluoride science is not science or scientific at all. It's distorted science made up by political officials who have a completely different agenda in mind other than public health. In fact, the information we have been fed about fluoride, its effectiveness, and its purpose is all highly in question. Fluoride was added to drinking water in an attempt to lower cavity rates in the late 1940s, as oral health was not up to par. When fluoride was added to public drinking water, it wasn't a whole lot long after that dental records were starting to get better. However, as the graph shows, even countries where the water was completely unfluoridated, the amount of cavities dropped at the exact same rate or better. If we look even further into ingesting fluoride through the drinking water, data shows it has no benefit to the teeth whatsoever. 98% of Europe is completely opposed to having fluoride added to their water supply, versus a great percentage of North America being fluoridated. The dental records in Europe show fewer cavities and tooth decay than what occurs in North America. To put the nail in the coffin of fluoridated drinking water, in Kuopio, Finland, water was fluoridated from 1959 to 1992. As public concern raised about the use of fluoride, it was removed from the water supply in 1992, and dental records got better. With no clear benefit at all, we continue to pump this highly toxic chemical into our water supplies. What about fluoride used topically versus systemically? In other words, fluoride that comes from toothpaste and the dental office. There is no data that shows fluoride used in fluoridation practices helps prevent tooth decay. Even in topically used situations, data has shown that fluoride actually rots teeth as opposed to helping them. Teeth rot when the enamel on the outside of the tooth becomes compromised and acid begins to eat away at the inside of the tooth. If acid sits on the outside of the tooth, over time, it begins to kill the adenosine diphosphatase and the enamel weakens. The problem with fluoride is, once it comes in contact with teeth, it kills the adenosine diphosphatase, which in turn compromises tooth enamel. As the findings of chemist researcher Dr. Gerard F. Judd show, not only does he find that fluoride rots the teeth, but there is absolutely no need for fluoride in creating strong tooth enamel. When looking at the dental records of Americans and Ugandans, Judd found the following. 30% of American youths ages 8 to 10 have no cavities. 100% of Ugandan youths ages 6 to 10 have no cavities. The reason Ugandan youths have 3 times better teeth than American youths is because they do not consume as many acidic foods, have no fluoride in their drinking water, have regular meals rather than sipping on acidic drinks all day, have more calcium and phosphate in their diet, and have fewer dentists to work on their teeth. So not only is there no evidence to show that fluoride helps prevent tooth decay, but there is plenty that shows it is quite harmful for the teeth. Fluoride is also responsible for much more than just tooth decay. Dental fluorosis is a tooth condition caused by fluoride. Fluoride is the only contributor in the creation of dental fluorosis. Dental fluorosis shows up as white or brown spots on the teeth and can also break away and pit at the enamel. Dental fluorosis is typically caused by fluoride exposed to the teeth between birth up to the age of 8. As a result of the use of fluoride, according to the CDC, dental fluorosis is found in 32% of American children. In fact, the effect fluoride can have on developing teeth is so immense that the American Dental Association and Center for Disease Control both state that parents should not be using fluoridated water for their baby's drinking water or formula. Those with evidence of dental fluorosis can also count on having too much fluoride in other areas of the body as well. Skeletal fluorosis is also common when the bones become overfluoridated. Having too much fluoride in the body poses risks to the organs and greatly increases the rate of cancer. We understand that the fluoride we use in toothpaste, water, and at the dentist is all toxic poison. We understand that there is no science to show these chemicals prevent tooth decay, but that they in fact harm teeth. Safety boards and our governments both know this very well. So why? Why do they continue to pump this toxic chemical into our water supply? The fluoride story starts in 1939, when Alcoa, the aluminum company of America, then the world's largest producer of sodium fluoride, and the Dow Chemical Company transferred its technology to Germany. At the end of World War II, the US government sent Elliot Perkins, a research worker in chemistry, biochemistry, physiology, and pathology, to take over the chemical plants in Germany. Perkins quickly learned from the German scientists that they had devised a scheme during World War II using fluoride to medicate water in order to mind control the populations of cities they had taken over. It was found that fluoridation caused slight damage to a specific part of the brain and neurotransmitters, making it more difficult for the person affected to defend his freedom, causing the individual to become more docile towards authority. Hitler's eugenics program was no secret to anyone. The CIA quickly picked up where he left off, making the chemical control of an entire nation a main part of their research. As research completed by chemist Charles E. Perkins shows, any person who drinks artificially fluoridated water for a period of 1 year or more will never be the same person mentally or physically.
I began to realize that fluoridation was a problem. One of the first things I did is I looked at my tube of toothpaste. It says drug facts. I know it's a drug. If I were to give it to you, it'd have to be a prescription. That's for swallowing. When it comes to toothpaste, it also says don't swallow. And if you do swallow, contact a poison control center. Well, the amount of fluoride that they're talking about is a pea-sized amount of fluoride. You probably don't see that in advertisements, a pea-sized amount of fluoride. Usually when I see an advertisement, it looks more like a Dairy Queen ice cream cone. That amount is 1/4 milligram of fluoride. Well, that's the same amount of fluoride as what we find in 8 ounces of water. Quarter milligram of fluoride, don't swallow. If you do, call the Poison Control Center.
We're developing a society because of all of these different toxins known to affect brain function. We're seeing a society that not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society. So everyone's sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government because they can't excel. We have these people of lower IQ who are totally dependent. Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out. And that's what they want. So, you know, you can kind of piece it together as to why they are so insistent in spending so many hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda money to dumb down society.
You have to begin to look at things for what they truly are. When we truly look at fluoride, we find that fluoride science was bought and paid for by the companies who are producing the most of it. It was a way for them to dispose of the toxic waste while profiting. Fluoride does absolutely nothing to prevent tooth decay. Of course, all of this benefits those in charge as well, as it creates a mentally docile nation who will believe what is said to them and do what they are told without question. The hard-to-swallow truth is, fluoride is used to chemically control human beings. Not only does fluoride cause issues for the teeth and mental health, but is highly linked and sometimes the direct cause of cancer, kidney disease, thyroid issues, bone disease, arthritis, immune system deficiencies, and the lowering of IQ. In fact, 18 separate human studies have been completed in China, India, Iran, and Mexico that all conclude fluoride is the direct cause of lowering IQ. You are now fully aware that fluoride is not what it seems, and you want to do something about it. So what can you do? When it comes to drinking water, it can be quite difficult to avoid fluoride at times, as it is found in the majority of bottled water as well. Find out if your city water is fluoridated or not. If your city is not fluoridated, drinking tap water versus bottled water will allow you to avoid the fluoride. But this still isn't ideal, as tap water still contains chlorine and other chemicals that aren't good for the body. The ideal situation is to purchase a water filtration system that filters out both chlorine and fluoride. Some better than others, but some also more expensive than others. Make sure the filter is capable of filtering out fluoride. In terms of toothpaste, there are many types of toothpaste out there that do not contain fluoride. Next time you're at the store, check out the various natural brands that do not contain fluoride. You can also use baking soda to brush your teeth instead of toothpaste. At the end of the day, fluoride is so heavily defended by people and some professionals because they are simply going by what they have been taught. They assume that there is actual evidence to show that fluoride is good for us and that it's safe to use. This is the same mentality we have taken towards many other things in our current world. Use materials like this documentary and others to educate your friends and family about fluoride. Gently approach your dentist with this information as well. Most professionals have no intention of harming anyone. They are only practicing what they have been taught. Many dentists have quickly changed their minds about fluoride once they have learned the truth about it. Finally, really think about why those in charge, who know full well what this chemical does, are putting it in our water. Use this same questioning when looking at other deceptions we have been fed. If you have yet to notice, we are in the midst of a mass awakening on this planet. Many are beginning to uncover truths about our world and why things are the way they are. Many are also beginning to realize the biggest deception of all. Bigger than fluoride, economics, education, religion, and so forth. The biggest deception we have been told is that we are a body and a mind, and that's it. There's nothing more and nothing else to our reality. The truth is, you are much more. So much more that if we figured it out, the game would be up for those in charge. This is precisely why our water is fluoridated.
Welcome everyone. I am here today with Dr. Bill Osmussen, who's on my right, and he is a leader in the fluoride opposition movement. He's been a full-time dentist for over 30 years in the Pacific Northwest, and in addition to dentistry, he has two interesting other characteristics which you wouldn't necessarily know. He has a master's in public health, or an MPH, which particularly suits him for this topic because he really has a credentialed degree in public health, and that's really a significant component for how fluoride impacts our culture. But in addition to that, he has an interesting history. He's an MK. And for those of you who don't know what MK is, he's a missionary kid. In other words, his parents were missionaries in Africa, and he grew up in Africa, I believe in Kenya, at least part of the time. And so he's got another interesting perspective and seeing life from a different perspective than most of us have had the opportunity to do. So today we're going to focus on fluoride, its impact, and some of the research he's been doing to really come to a solution to remove it from our water supply at a different level than we're positioning, but I think it's a really effective one. And he's come up with some really surprising and solid information that you need to know because of some of the initiatives that we're going to be establishing this year, and that allow you to become involved in a local community group, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the conversation. But welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here with you.
So why don't you, I think most people viewing this understand that fluoride is believed to be useful to protect against dental caries.
I promoted fluoridation for 25 years, and over the last about 5 to 8 years, it was really under the coaching of my patients. Said, Bill, you need to look at the science on fluoridation once again. The research on fluoride is mixed as far as benefit. If you look closely at the studies and you combine them all together, I'm convinced that if there is a benefit, it's no longer there, in part because we're ingesting too much fluoride. So that even if a person says, yeah, I believe in fluoride and I think it's wonderful, it reduces decay, you have to start looking at how much should we get. And I was looking down at this basket of toothpaste, and I said, okay, Bill, you're a nutritionist. You got your master's in public health and nutrition. What does it say? So I reached down and I picked up, and it wasn't this one. This one I got from the hotel as a gift at the hotel. And then I started reading the label on it. And keep out of the reach of children under 6 years of age. Okay, that sounds reasonable. And adults apply a pea-size amount and contact the Poison Control Center if you swallow. Hang on a second, hang on. How much is, so I just took off the lid. I started doing pea-size amounts, put it all on a piece of paper, calculated out what it was, and oh my goodness, a pea-size amount. Now they're talking about a baby pea, because I did a regular pea and I came up with half as much. But what they're talking about is you can probably see it on here. Oh, that's too much. That's about the pea size that should be used. A tiny, tiny baby pea size of toothpaste, because you're supposed to get 150 brushings out of something like this. Well, you know, when you see advertisements of it, you're going to see it, and they're going to have it like this, and then they're going to, you get that Dairy Queen little curl up at the top there. Ooh, now I've got my Dairy Queen ice cream cone. But that's nothing like what you're supposed to be doing. That's not.
That's a week's or a month's worth of dose, right? Isn't it?
No, more than that.
That's more than a month?
More than a month. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, let's get a photo on this. This is more than a month. The one they use for marketing illustrative purposes is more than a month's worth of toothpaste that you're supposed to use according to the label instructions. And if you don't believe us, read your toothpaste or go to the store. If you're smart enough to not have this in your house, go to the store and read it.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Now, the FDA permits variable wording, but that's basically what's there. Well, that in the research literature works out to 1/4 milligram of fluoride. This water here happens to be Chicago water out of the faucet. This contains 1/4 milligram of fluoride. There seems to be a disconnect with me there. Okay, they tell me not to swallow 1/4 milligram of fluoride in my toothpaste, but they're forcing me to swallow 1/4 milligram in 1 glass of water. In China, they don't allow fluoride to be put into the water because it's too toxic and it causes damage. And so what they do is they take their waste product of their phosphate fertilizer industry and they ship it to the United States.
Which is fluoride. That's where most of the fluoride is taken.
There you go. And so we drink what they won't allow in there. Now, if you took that same fluoride...
So are we using theirs? We're using theirs because of the cost, or do we
We're
use
using it because we don't make enough.
Oh, we don't make it. So we're using ours that we produce in the U.S., and we import the industrial waste from China to put into our water.
Correct.
That's interesting.
Because we're so tough, we can drink what they won't allow in their water. Anyway, and not only that, but it's contaminated. Ours is and theirs is with lead and arsenic and radionucleotides and aluminum and all kinds of things in it, because it's not a pharmaceutical grade what's put into the water. So this area of brain damage is so staggering to me that it's hard for me to gasp for air at times. This latest research was published by our National Institute of Health here in the United States.
NIH, which is about as prestigious as you can get for a certifying authority in publishing research.
Absolutely. And it was done by their Center for Disease Control along with the Shanghai University. The research is very, very good quality. Rarely have we done a blood serum study on fluoride and what it does and what the IQ is and the relationship there. So in this aspect, I'm not saying that everything out of China is great. I'm just saying in this aspect, their health departments have actually done research where ours have failed to do it. And that's typical world over. The Europeans don't fluoridate their water, hardly at all. Ireland does some. There is some fluoride salts, for instance, in France, but that's reduced from about 50% down to, I think it's around 20% now, so they're cutting back. The dental associations in Europe don't recommend fluoride supplements anymore. We all agree, there's no dispute on this by anyone that I know of, that too much fluoride can cause dental fluorosis and skeletal fluorosis, but dental fluorosis. Dental fluorosis is shown by little white spots in the teeth, brown spots in the teeth, this type of thing. And if it's just on one tooth and not any other teeth, then it may not be the fluoride. So it should be similar teeth that are developing at similar times, and then that would be the fluoride. The National Research Council says that fluoride is not beneficial after the age of 8 because our teeth have finished forming. Systemic fluoride. Before the age of about 1, mother's milk has virtually no fluoride in it. And so we shouldn't have it before about the age of 1. We shouldn't have it after the age of 8. So we give fluoride in the community for everybody in the hopes that maybe the children between the ages of 1 and 8 will have a benefit. So one of the concerns I have is the brain. I mean, our brain is the economic impact of brain damage. We're looking at about $500 to $1,000 per year less income for every IQ point that is dropped. When you know
it's a powerful point. I just want to emphasize that $1,000 a year income for every IQ point.
Yes.
And you know, this is kind of not a really great economy right now. So that's going to start to add up pretty quickly.
75% of Americans now get fluoridated water, but about 65%, maybe a little bit more, have artificially fluoridated water. So in other words, fluoride naturally occurs in water in a fair amount, especially in your volcanic regions and in harder water areas. There's fluoride naturally occurring, and sometimes too high levels where the EPA will require that the fluoride be removed or diluted with other water. So,
is there a significant difference from this naturally occurring fluoride versus the one that's artificially added?
Absolutely, and this is one area that the EPA does not differentiate, and they should. Naturally occurring fluoride in hard water areas often has a calcium fluoride, which calcium and fluoride love each other. They really bond well, and it's not absorbed as well in the body. Whereas the hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is the waste product that's put into the water, that dissolves better. Maybe not as good as it should, but it does dissolve better, and it tends to be absorbed in the body more. So the safety factor, calcium fluoride, is about 1,000 times less toxic as the hydrofluorosilicic acid and the sodium fluoride.
Largely related to its absorption?
Yeah. Almost all of the studies that are done are using sodium fluoride and not the contaminated waste product that's put into the water. So that's one of the problems with the studies.
One of the things I neglected to mention is that you were a full-time practicing dentist. But
yes.
You took time off,
right.
Physically took time off, so kind of semi-retired with no other benefits, because as a practicing professional, your only income is from your practice. So you took time off, stopped receiving income, and committed yourself full-time to kind of like missionary work to this fluoride process. And you've done that for how long now? A few years?
About 5 years.
5 years. So you're really committed to this in a very significant way, far more than most other professionals have done. So you're really a champion from that perspective. And in that time off that you've taken to commit yourself to this research and dedication and seeking to make a change at a legislature level, both either local, state, or federal, you've encountered this research, put it together, and that's what you're about to share now.
Absolutely. The studies are incredible on the reduction in success in marriage, the reduction in education. High school success is much lower, college success is much lower. When you start reducing IQ, you're going to have much more increase in crime. So do you? Yes. When we go and we compare counties, we find that there's a 71% increase in crime in counties where there's fluoridation. We look at states, we find that there's a 100% increase in crime in states with fluoridation. Where does this whole thing first start? Before conception. Because it's that sperm and that egg that are having damage from the fluoride. When they get together in the fluoridated areas, you have more Down's syndrome. We're going to know more and more in time of some of these other factors of damaging that sperm and egg. The problem that we have with nature is the fact that the fluoride crosses the placenta to the fetus, developing fetus. And so when they do biopsies of aborted fetuses, intentionally aborted fetuses, they find that, especially in China, where they will do late-term abortions, they find that the development of the brain is significantly different in the fluoridated communities and the non-fluoridated communities. I don't drink fluoridated water if I can ever help it. Do I bathe in it? I don't have any real side effects that I know of, and I still bathe in fluoridated water. I avoid it when I don't live in a fluoridated community most of the time. When I'm in Seattle, I am in a fluoridated community. I avoid toothpaste. Those are the two big, the fluoridated toothpaste. I use a non-fluoridated toothpaste, and you're coming out with a toothpaste now. I would highly recommend it. I've tasted it, I've looked at it, and looked at the ingredients. It's excellent. So that's what I would definitely use, and I highly recommend the product that you have in non-fluoridated toothpaste.
But there's others, and this is a good one. And it has special herbs that tend to enhance its benefits relative to some of the others. But the key take-home message is that you got to remember this toothbrush. That's a month's worth of fluoride, a month's worth.
Yes.
So if you like that much toothpaste, fine, but don't use the fluoridated stuff. And you just can't use it. You're just asking for trouble, because invariably they're going to swallow some. It's like physiologically impossible not to swallow this stuff. And if it
absorbs through the skin.
Yeah, and if you're obsessive compulsive, and you're using this much, you've got to take your child to the emergency room by the recommendations on the label. And anyone should have the opportunity and freedom to choose using fluoride in their child. But I think you presented some very compelling evidence. We certainly provide others on the site that there is no benefit to doing this. So you don't have them swallow it. Clearly, but don't have them use the fluoride toothpaste, and you don't have to worry about this issue. But for whatever reason, if you choose to believe that this isn't true, and you're using fluoride toothpaste, first use 1/30 this amount, and make sure they don't swallow it.
We had a chance to talk to Dr. Russell Blaylock, MD, a retired neurosurgeon and author. His trailblazing research has tirelessly documented the fact that there is an epidemic of neurological disorders in the Western world directly tied to toxins in our environment, and the story behind the story concerning the larger global eugenics program behind population reduction.
I'm Dr. Russell Blaylock. I'm a board-certified neurosurgeon. I've retired from active practice. Now I do primarily theoretical research in neurosciences and spend most of my time writing research articles, review articles on neuroscience projects at the present time. What I found interesting in all of this when I first started looking at it, looking at the funding by the Rockefeller Foundation and many of the other foundations like Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, and looking back into the history of it, and I came accidentally upon a book by Dr. Lily Kay. She was doing a research project looking at the origins of molecular biology in the United States. And that was primarily my interest, was just reviewing the history of molecular biology. But to my surprise, much of the book describes what was called the Science of Man project by the Rockefeller Foundation. And primarily, and this is in the period about 1910, primarily what he was interested in, and his foundation board, was doing social engineering. They were concerned that society was made of a lot of people they considered undesirables. Their definition of undesirables was people that had lower IQ, people that had physical defects, people who had diseases, people who did not behave in a way that these group of elitists thought people should behave in a society. So their idea was to use eugenics, which was the primary science at the time, to redevelop man, to create a new type of person. And they coined the term social engineering. Now, of course, at that time, we didn't have DNA as a concept. So they were using rather crude genetics to bring this about in the very beginning. So what she shows is the Rockefeller Foundation was really putting a lot of money in this. And in order to do that, he thought, what I'll do is I will fund major universities. And he picked Caltech as one of those universities, and then some in the East like Harvard and Johns Hopkins and Columbia, University of Chicago as the primary centers where this type of study would be carried out and how to re-engineer human beings to be in the form that they thought humans should be. And gradually, as science began to become more sophisticated, and eugenics began to get a really bad name as the period of Adolf Hitler occurred, and you realize that the Rockefeller eugenists, before Hitler became well-known in power, they were traveling to Germany and exchanging information on these eugenic programs. So a fair amount of this information came from the Rockefeller Foundation. Of course, after World War II, when the world found out a lot of what was going on in eugenics and the horror of eugenics, most of these programs were abandoned, and the Rockefeller Foundations very quickly said to all their members, let's never use the name eugenics anymore. What we'll talk about is social engineering, the new science of man, behavioralism. So they had these key words that meant basically the same type idea, that is redesigning man and man's behavior and controlling it through elitist ideas, but we would do it through new science. And we would establish major institutions in the United States that would control medical education, through his General Education Board, which was a very powerful foundation regulation of education in America. And so he would appoint professors that would be directors of these programs. He groomed people who believed, like he did, that in fact man should be redesigned. We need this science of man to re-engineer human beings. But do it in a more scientific way than this crude eugenics program that he began with. And what that necessitated was using what was called molecular biology. Well, with the discovery of DNA, this became more sophisticated in that you could manipulate certain genes and change how the brain functioned. And of course, then they got into the neuroscience field itself and began to look at, well, how does the brain work? How can we change behavior by altering brain function? And this has led up to the present day when we have things like the decade of the brain, where there's intense study of the behavioral functions of the brain and how it works. But if you look through her book where she talks about the actual funding, their actual ideas, it's the same theme that started back in 1910. That is, we're going to recreate man in our image, what we think man should be, how people should think, what they should think, the limitations on their behavior. It's a true scientific social engineering of human beings. Well, leading from that, when we start looking at, well, look at some of the programs that have sort of spurred out of this. You know, the high-tech DNA manipulation, brain manipulation through electrodes or through transmission outside of electrodes to change human thinking. These are the more sophisticated programs that are a little bit more obvious, but then there's things that are less obvious. For instance, fluoridating water. We look at the original justification for fluoridating water back in 1945 when they picked a couple of cities, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Muskegon. Grand Rapids was going to be fluoridated, Muskegon was not, and they were going to compare and use the idea that fluoride was preventing cavities. So even before the study had been completed, they announced that it was a grand success and that fluoridated water produced a 30 to 60% reduction in cavities. What they didn't say was that in the unfluoridated city, there was a very similar drop in the incidence of cavities as well. And in fact, throughout the entire world, we began to see in the developed world a tremendous fall in the incidence of dental cavities. That had nothing to do with fluoride. What it had to do with was increased intake of calcium, mainly through cheese consumption, and better diets, better oral hygiene. And a number of studies proved that, one of which was conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service. It was one of the largest American studies at the time. They looked at 39,000 school children in which they looked at the effect of fluoridation versus non-fluoridation, and they found it had no beneficial effect at all. Well, they hid that document so scientists couldn't examine it, and the public and the media would never see it. Well, Dr. Yamanianis, who is a chemist, filed a Freedom of Information lawsuit, had it released, and then he saw why they wanted to hide it, and that's because it clearly demonstrated fluoride did not reduce cavities. Since that time, there's been a number of studies, one of which included 8 countries, another which included all studies on fluoride, independent studies on fluoride and dental caries for the past 30 years. Another study included 400,000 children in India. All of these studies showed the same thing. Adding fluoride to water did not reduce cavities at all. And in fact, several of the studies it showed it increased cavities. And it did so because it weakened the dental layer of the tooth and made it more prone to become cavities. So now that we've established, and it's admitted by the National Science Foundation study, which was recently completed, that fluoridating water does not reduce cavities. There's no modern evidence whatsoever that fluoridating water reduces cavities at all. So you have to ask the question, well, why are you still fluoridating water? Now, European countries have caught on very quickly. None of them fluoridate their water. Britain fluoridates about 60% of its water, and it forced fluoridation on Ireland. But the mainland European countries do not fluoridate water, do not allow it. But the United States, we still have the federal government and in collusion with the American Dental Association, going to various cities, even small cities, using their pressure, their money, taxpayer money, to try to force local city councils to fluoridate the water. In the state of California, in fact, they've ordered the fluoridation of all waters in every city and village over 10,000 inhabitants, whether they vote to not fluoridate their water or not. So you have to ask the question, well, now that scientifically we've proven that fluoridating water has no effect on reducing cavities, why is the federal government spending so much money and effort to force fluoridation of the rest of the water supply? And even insisting that bottled water be fluoridated, that no one would have access to unfluoridated water except the elite. Well, if we look at the scientific studies on what is the effect of fluoridation, well, we know fluoridating water through a number of studies, some of which were ordered by the federal government itself in the earlier days, increases cancer risk. Burke and Yamin, two scientists, did one of the largest cancer studies in relationship to fluoridating water supply. They looked at all cities, 10 cities in the eastern part of the United States. And they showed that in fluoridated cities, as compared to unfluoridated, there was a 10% increase in cancer. This was a criticized study, so they repeated it, and they did all cities east of the Mississippi, above 10,000 population, comparing fluoridated and unfluoridated. Now what they did, they compared the cancer statistics before fluoridation and then 13 to 17 years after fluoridation. Again, they found there was a 10% increase cancer death incidence in the cities that had been fluoridated. Now when you say cancer death, and that means people who died of cancer, you can appreciate there's going to be a lot more people who developed cancer who didn't die. So the actual cancer incidence is much higher. This study was so impressive to some members of Congress, they ordered a study of this link to cancer through the Patel Research Institute. These studies showed that, number one, it produced a number of types of cancer, one which was a very rare liver cancer, and it significantly increased the growth of cancer in people who already had cancers. Well, despite these studies, they're still fluoridating water. They found out it increased fractures, not only in the elderly, but in younger women. And it increased hip fractures in older men to a greater extent than the women. Well, a hip fracture in someone over 65 has a high mortality rate. So it's a good way, if you wanted to increase the mortality of the elderly and get them out of the way, which is in discussion today. We know that it has profound effects on the brain. One of the most impressive was done by Dr. Phyllis Mullenix, who was a highly regarded neurotoxicologist, someone who studies the toxicity of different elements on the brain. Well, she was drafted into doing this when she worked for the Forsyth Dental Research Institute. And she had never worked with fluoride, didn't know a lot about it. Now, I know this firsthand because I've interviewed her and talked with her, and I know her. And she said when she first was going to do the research project to see if fluoridating water had any effect on the brain's function, she thought it would be negative. She didn't think fluoride would have any adverse effects on the brain. She did one of the largest studies that's been done in animals to see the effect of fluoridating water on their brain function. And she used a very innovative modern technique. And in this technique, she used computers to see the behavior of the animal so that it was totally objective. There was no subjective influence by the researcher themselves. That had never been done before, and all this was high-tech equipment. She completed her study, and to her surprise, the fluoride produced two main effects. If you fed the fluoride to a pregnant animal, the offspring then became hyperactive. In other words, like ADHD. If you gave the fluoride after birth, the animal became very lethargic.
In 1994, I left Forsyth and chairman of that department, or head of the toxicology department. Then what I found in that study were three basic conclusions. There was no question that behavior was vulnerable to fluoride. Whether you got a very short exposure, and this in animals, if they're young, if it's prenatal, or if it's early postnatal, all you needed was 2 or 3 days exposure to this, and it caused a permanent change in behavior when the animals grew up. That's all the exposure. If you took all the other exposures away, and they got none other but that one exposure, that was it. It was enough to permanently change their behavior. Now, also in that study, we found that the effects varied with age. If you were prenatally exposed, it was hyperactivity was the problem. If you were exposed as adults or at weanlings, we called it the couch potato. The problem was that they were hypoactive and very slow. Also, we found that the fluoride accumulated in the brain. And this is very different than what the literature had said before, because the literature had shown before, but they didn't do it appropriately. They said that it does not get into the brain and it does not accumulate, and we know that that is wrong. And this is just to show you some levels. For example, a control and exposed female in the hippocampus of the brain. Some of the areas it's doubling and tripling in actual amount of fluoride in those regions of the brain. So we knew we were in trouble. The paper came out, and I started getting response from all over the world, and that's when I started learning that there's more to this fluoride story than just that it's good for your teeth. I got more information because I was upsetting people by saying this, and I learned that fluorine is a natural element. It is in a lot of different things. It's more common than chlorine and nitrogen, or as common as chlorine and nitrogen. And it's more common than carbon even. And because it's so ubiquitous, that assures that you are going to be exposed to fluoride, whether it's in your drinking water, whether it's through the air, whether it's via food or soil. You're still going to get exposures to fluoride. The other thing that was concerning was there are a lot of occupations out there that you are being exposed to fluoride to, whether you know it or not. If you work with aluminum, if you work with magnesium, if you work with any petrochemical, if you are in coal production, if you work in a glass factory or a brick factory or a tile factory, all of these will assure that you are going to be exposed to fluoride. You absorb it through your skin, you can inhale it. And to your body, it doesn't matter where this fluoride is coming from, your drinking water or wherever it's coming from, to your body, it's the same thing. I found that fluoride is at the hazardous waste sites, the EPA's national priorities list. Yes, it's a pesticide, as mentioned before. And then I found that fluoride is used to process uranium, and it is used to produce atomic energy. And so this really concerned me because I didn't realize, coming from a dental institution, I thought that fluoride was only coming from drinking water. I really didn't realize that when I drank a Coke, when I drank Snapple tea, when I drank grape juice, that I was really adding to my body burden of fluoride with all these others. So I thought this was important enough to submit another grant in '96. And the information, they were still a little scared about this, and they said, gee, there doesn't seem to be a link between the brain or bone problems. I don't see how this could be possible. And then in walked Cliff Honecker into my life, and he asked me 2 questions. I'd never met or heard from this before. He knocked on my door, and this summer, as a matter of fact, in 1996, and he asked 2 questions. He asked me about my CNS work, and he asked me about my relationship to Harold Hodge. Remember, Hodge was one of the people in my department of toxicology I'd worked with, and he was a chief pharmacologist on the Manhattan Project. This man had never said anything to me in all that time. He asked me lots of questions about what we were doing, but he never actually said what was going on. Cliff showed me some documents then from the Manhattan Project that had recently been declassified. I then got a publication from 1949 where this man had been there when they actually started working with the fluoride and did the original toxicology studies. And they described what happened to some of these people when they were accidentally overexposed to fluoride. And here's what he found. All the seriously injured individuals were unusually nervous, apprehensive for 4 to 5 days after the accident. One individual was definitely overstimulated for about 3 days, exaggerating all facial expressions and being unusually verbose and talkative. At times, he was almost incoherent. The other seriously injured patient, although normally quiet and placid, became very apprehensive with a similar tendency toward the exaggeration of statements. The opinion of all observers held that the mental reactions were more than could possibly be explained on a fear-reaction basis. The second accident that they had, the mental status for the first 5 or 6 days following the accident was marked by general sluggishness, the couch potato syndrome, with transient periods of restlessness, irascibility, and nervous tension with occasional silliness and loss of contact. Does that sound like anybody you know?
I want clarity. Is it better to ingest fluoride for the health of your teeth or to apply it topically?
The main effect from fluoride is the topical effect.
I want clarity. Is it better to ingest fluoride for the health of your teeth or to apply it topically?
The main effect from fluoride is the topical effect. The topical effect
was when Dr. Wachowski agreed that fluoride works topically. Now that should be the end of fluoridation, when they admit that fluoride works on the outside of the teeth and not from inside the body. That completely removes the rug from underneath fluoridation. Why on earth, when you know it works topically, and you know that fluoridated toothpaste is universally available, everybody has access to fluoridated toothpaste, you can brush it on your teeth and spit it out. And this way you avoid exposing to every tissue in the body to a known toxic substance, and you avoid exposing it to people that don't want it. You avoid violating the individual's right to informed consent. Once she admitted that fluoride works topically, that this is the dominant mechanism, she removed the rationale from water fluoridation. But again, she's trapped because she's a middle-level bureaucrat obeying the orders of the people above who say this practice must continue. Why they think it must continue is up for you to decide. I don't understand why they want to keep this practice going so intensely that they're prepared to send all these bureaucrats from Toronto or Ottawa to London to keep pushing and pushing. I don't understand.
Toothpaste boxes in the United States of America, they have a warning to go to poison control if you ingest the toothpaste based on the fluoride in it. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
In Canada, we do not have those warnings?
In Canada, it says do not swallow.
I'm just going to say, nearly all the experts last night were dentists, representing dental organizations. They have something to tell us about teeth, but they have no qualifications to tell us about the dangers that fluoride poses to bones, brains, the endocrine system, the kidney, or any other tissue in the body. So when they say that fluoridation is safe, they are out of order. They are not qualified to tell the public it's safe. All they can say is, we think it's good for teeth. We think it's safe for teeth. They can't even say that because of dental fluorosis. But they certainly are not qualified to say it's safe for the bones, the brains, and the endocrine tissues. And
look at all the places where it's not available. Now, most material data safety sheets aren't like this. Here's the section on ecological information. We have no idea what we're doing to the environment because nobody's done the test. Wouldn't that be nice if we did? Well, My last slide, I'll zip through. If you take 2 liters of water a day at the amount we have, really that's a lethal dose spread out over about 5 years. This is sodium fluoride. This is what you find in toothpaste. Is it toxic? Yes. Is it really toxic? Yes. Is it really, really toxic? Yes.
I'm Joe Cummins. I'm a professor of emeritus at the University of Western Ontario, where I taught advanced genetics, microbial genetics, and environmental pathology and toxicology. Now, my concern over the conduct of many during the meetings was particularly exasperating to me was comments from authorities from the university who made the claim that contradicted what my topic is, which was the claim that fluoride was not a genotoxin. It did not injure the genes. But that was a staggering blunder on their part, because there are hundreds of papers on the genetic toxicology of fluoride. I've reviewed the majority of the papers in the area, and there should be no argument that fluoride is not a genetic toxin. It is a genetic toxin. I found that disturbing because it was a public relations effort on the part of people with scientific credentials, and people with scientific credentials should not prostitute their credentials to produce public relations.
So if you were to ask me, and I believe you have, fluoride in the water has definitely not worked for me. And I've actually taken a bit of exception tonight to hearing people say that fluorosis is kind of a acceptable collateral damage to fluoride in the water. So my first question is, whose ego are you trying to protect if you decide to continue with this policy? We've heard it already, but just because someone thought this was a good idea years ago doesn't mean that it's actually a good idea today. It seems an extreme example of hubris for members of the medical and scientific community to say that without exception, they know what the effects of fluoride will be on each and every very unique individual. They can't possibly know. And why should we, why should you, me, and every other Londoner be willing to accept their recommendations when there seems to be a growing body of evidence to the contrary?
And in a statement last year, Dr. Brian Orszewski said that 15% of our children are not getting cavities, but that means, tragically, that 85% of our children are getting cavities. And considering the fact that cavities are new to humans, we shouldn't be experiencing tooth decay at all. How is it possible for someone to say that fluoride is effective when 85% of our children are getting cavities?
Yeah! We see abscessed teeth, we see swollen faces, we see children crying from painful teeth, and we know that ultimately teeth will have to be lost. These are all very real problems associated with cavities in the young child. We also know that children do die from dental decay. The child in this photograph has one visible abscess, and all 4 of the upper front teeth had to be removed. The child in this photograph has 2 abscessed teeth. The infected teeth had to be removed.
As Chief Medical Officer of Health for Ontario, I am very concerned about the loss of fluoridated drinking water in certain communities. In spite of consistent evidence that water fluoridation is safe and effective. We've already seen the impact of removing fluoride from municipal drinking water systems here in Ontario. And as was noted in the recent report to Toronto Board of Health on water fluoridation, the rate of dental decay in 5-year-olds in the municipality of Dryden increased by 26% in 7 years after water fluoridation was discontinued.
Since fluoridation was stopped in Dryden, Ontario, for 7 years, it's been stopped for 7 years, and tooth decay has gone up. Where's that published? I happen to know, because I was there, that Dryden didn't stop fluoridation to 2008. Wait a moment, 2008, 2008, we're talking 3 years. So I don't know how these people can think that there's 7 years since they stopped fluoridation. If you get a simple fact like that wrong from the so-called experts, what does it say about all the other facts? But also, I think at least 4 times they mentioned that the Center of Disease Control said that fluoridation is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century. There are not many public health achievements, by the way, you know, seatbelts and so on. They're not saying very much. But you've got to know that this quote from the Center of Disease Control is not coming from this big federal agency of 16,000 people in Atlanta, Georgia. It's coming from 30 people. It's coming from the Oral Health Division. It's coming from 30 people who are dentally trained, whose job is to promote fluoridation. So to use this statement from these people as if it's some kind of objective analysis of both the effectiveness and safety of fluoridation is a joke. It's a sick joke, because if you look at the report on which it's based, number one, it was 6 years out of date on the health literature that we reviewed, and the evidence that it actually worked is so pathetic. It would an undergraduate, I would have failed if they had produced that in a term paper.
And it was because of the children that Dr. Weston A. Price set out to do his research back in the 1920s and 30s. What he noticed was, in his child patients, is he started to see several cavities in his children for the first time. Now, he was treating the parents of these children, and the parents, it was rare to see any cavities in the parents whatsoever. So he was very curious as to why suddenly, in one generation, he started to see outbreaks of dental caries. So what he did was he traveled around the world visiting several countries, and he examined the diets of many different cultures, and he compared their diets with their overall health and their dental health as well. Now, he took hundreds of pictures in several different areas of the world, and I'm only going to show you a couple of examples. One in the South Pacific, and now the teenage boys that he took pictures of in this village. What he noticed in this village was that dental cavities were extremely rare. They had beautiful teeth, they had straight teeth, and overall excellent health, and their diet did not include any of our modern westernized, industrialized foods. They ate their traditional diet and basically enjoyed overall health because of it. And then when he visited neighboring villages and tribes, what had happened was where they were importing modern foods, he also noticed rampant tooth decay and modern diseases. So you see the dramatic differences in terms of their oral health from one tribe or village to another. And here he runs into, in this case, he was off the Scottish coast, and he met these two brothers. The one brother had excellent dental health, and he had maintained his primitive diet, and the other brother had rampant tooth decay, and he had begun eating modern foods like white bread, jam, highly sweetened coffee, and sweet chocolates. And his father complained that this brother also had trouble getting out of bed in the morning. And another observation by Dr. Weston A. Price was that the senior citizens did not need false teeth, that they were able to retain all of their teeth, many of them, to an old age. And there were several components of a healthy diet, one of them being, of course, that they did not eat industrially processed foods, that a large majority of them had emphasized healthy fats like butter, meat, and egg yolks in their diet. These are the foods, unfortunately, that we are told to stay away from. And there's too much at stake. I'm just going to finish up by saying, considering how sick our children are today, and the fact that an astounding 85% of them have cavities, rather than adding a chemical to our water supply, it's clear that our time and money would be better spent protecting them from industrially processed foods. Thank you so much.
The latest word from the experts at NAS-NRC. In March of 2006, the National Academy of Sciences Board on Environmental Studies and Toxicology released their 450-page review titled Fluoride in Drinking Water, a Scientific Review of EPA Standards. Here are a few examples of what they had to say. Grapes and grape products, teas, and processed chicken can be high in fluoride apart from any contribution from preparation or processed water. There appears to be general acceptance in today's dental literature that enamel fluorosis is a toxic effect of fluoride intake that, in its severest forms, can produce adverse effects on dental health, such as tooth function and caries experience. For example, the most severe forms of fluorosis manifest as heavily stained, pitted, and friable enamel that can result in loss of dental function. In more severely fluorosed teeth, the enamel is pitted and discolored and is prone to fracture and wear. The degree of porosity, hypermineralization of such teeth results in a diminished physical strength of the enamel, and parts of the superficial enamel may break away. In the most severe forms of dental fluorosis, the extent and degree of porosity within the enamel are so severe that most of the outermost enamel will be chipped off immediately following eruption. With increasing severity, the subsurface enamel all along the tooth becomes increasingly porous. The more severe forms are subject to extensive mechanical breakdown of the surface. With more severe forms of fluorosis, caries risk increases because of pitting and loss of the outer enamel. Severe enamel fluorosis is treated to prevent further enamel loss and to address the cosmetic appearance of teeth. Treatments include bleaching, microabrasion, and the application of veneers or crowns. Bleaching and microabrasion are typically used with the mild to moderate forms of enamel fluorosis. Bleaching is the least invasive procedure, but does not eliminate the dark stains associated with severe enamel fluorosis. One of the functions of tooth enamel is to protect the dentin and ultimately the pulp from decay and infection. Severe enamel fluorosis compromises this health protective function by causing structural damage to the tooth. Fluorides also increase the production of free radicals in the brain through several biological pathways. These changes have a bearing on the possibility that fluorides act to increase the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Today, the disruption of aerobic metabolism in the brain, a reduction of effectiveness of acetylcholine as a transmitter, and an increase in free radicals are thought to be causative factors for this disease. More research is needed to clarify fluoride's biochemical effect on the brain. Gastrointestinal system. The primary symptoms of GI injury are nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. Such symptoms have been reported in case studies and in a clinical study involving double-blind tests on subjects drinking water artificially fluoridated at 1 mg per liter. In the clinical study, subjects were selected whose GI symptoms appeared with the consumption of fluoridated water and disappeared when they switched to non-fluoridated water. A pharmacist prepared solutions of sodium fluoride and sodium silicofluoride so that the final fluoride ion concentrations were 1 mg per liter. 8 bottles of water were prepared with either fluoridated water or distilled water. Patients were instructed to use 1 bottle at a time for 2 weeks. They were asked to record their symptoms throughout the study period. Neither patient nor physician administering the water knew which water samples were fluoridated until after the experiments were completed. From an immunologic standpoint, individuals who are immunocompromised, in other words, AIDS, transplant, and bone marrow replacement patients, could be at greater risk of the immunologic effects of fluoride. Overall, there was consensus among the committee that there is scientific evidence that under certain conditions, fluoride can weaken bone and increase the risk of fractures.